I almost didn't go to my high school reunion. The invitation had been sitting unopened on my kitchen counter for 3 days, like it was waiting for me to decide who I still was. Every time I walked past it, I felt that old, familiar tightness in my chest, the one that used to show up in crowded hallways and group photos where I never quite knew where to stand. High school had been a place where I learned how to shrink. I wasn't the loud girl. I wasn't the pretty girl. I wasn't the rich girl. I was the girl who said sorry too often. Sorry for bumping into someone. Sorry for asking a question. Sorry for existing in a space that other people seemed to occupy so confidently. And then there was Ava. Ava had been the kind of girl people followed without thinking. She didn't yell. She didn't need to. Her power came from subtle things, side glances, half smiles, whispered comments that somehow always found their way back to you. She used to look at my thrift store shoes and say, "Oh, vintage," in a tone that made everyone laugh. She once leaned over my desk during math class and said, "You'd actually be pretty if you tried." Tried. I tried everything. I tried to straighten my hair the way she did. I tried to laugh softer. I tried to speak less. I tried to disappear in ways that didn't look obvious. But the thing about being young and gentle is that you don't realize when someone is teaching you how to doubt yourself. You just think that's how life works, that some people are born to lead and others are born to clap for them. At 16, I believed her version of me more than my own. What hurt more than the teasing was the betrayal of silence. Some of the girls who watched her humiliate me were my friends, or at least I thought they were. They'd text me after school, "Don't take it personally. That's just how she is." Or, "She doesn't mean it," but no one ever told her to stop, and somehow I became the sensitive one, the dramatic one, the girl who couldn't take a joke. I started sitting alone at lunch not because I wanted to, but because it was easier than pretending not to notice the way conversations shifted when I joined them. Home wasn't much better. My parents were kind, but they were tired. We didn't have much money. My father worked long hours. My mother stretched every dollar like it was elastic. I never told them about Ava. I didn't want to be another burden they had to fix. Instead, I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself that high school wasn't real life. But here's what people don't say about emotional wounds: they don't stay in the hallway where they happened. They follow you into adulthood, into job interviews, into relationships, into every room where you wonder if you belong. Even years later, when I graduated from university with honors, a small voice inside me whispered, "You probably just got lucky." When I got my first job in finance, I worked twice as hard as everyone else, not because I loved ambition, but because I was afraid of being exposed. Afraid someone would look at me the way Ava used to. Afraid someone would say, "Still nobody, huh?" The truth is, I didn't become successful because I was fearless. I became successful because I was afraid of ever feeling that small again. I learned to read people carefully, to listen more than I spoke, to observe power dynamics in rooms. I understood how insecurity hides behind charm, how confidence can sometimes be performance. While others networked loudly, I built relationships quietly. While some chased recognition, I studied patterns. I learned where money moved. I learned how businesses rise and fall. I learned that influence is rarely visible at first. And slowly, without announcing it to anyone, I stopped apologizing. Not overnight, but in meetings when someone interrupted me, I didn't shrink. I finished my sentence. When I negotiated contracts, I didn't smile nervously. I asked for what made sense. When someone underestimated me, I didn't rush to prove myself. I let time do that. Still, the reunion invitation unsettled me, because no matter how calm I had become, there was a part of me that was still 16. Still standing in that hallway, still hearing laughter. I opened the envelope on a quiet Thursday night. 10-year high school reunion. It read in gold letters, formal, polished, confident, just like her. I stared at my reflection in the dark window beside me. I didn't see the girl from before. I saw a woman. Composed, self-sufficient, financially secure, an investor now, someone who made decisions that affected entire companies. But healing isn't about forgetting who you were. It's about meeting her again and realizing she survived. I picked up my phone and RSVP'd yes before I could change my mind. Not because I needed validation. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted to walk into that room as the woman I had become and finally stop apologizing for taking up space. I didn't know yet that Ava would be there, and I definitely didn't know that our lives had crossed again in a way she could never have imagined. But I was about to find out. The reunion was held at a renovated hotel downtown, the kind with tall glass windows and soft golden lighting that made everyone look slightly better than they remembered themselves being. I stood outside for a full minute before going in. It wasn't fear exactly. It was memory. Memory has a way of arriving before you do. When I finally stepped inside, the sound hit me first: laughter, music, the hum of people trying to impress each other with updates about their lives. Name tags were neatly arranged on a table near the entrance. I picked mine up, Maya Raman. I ran my thumb across the letters. For years that name had felt fragile. Now it felt steady. A few classmates recognized me, smiles, polite hugs. The usual questions: what have you been up to? Where are you living now? Wow, you look amazing. I answered gently. I didn't overshare. I never had. I work in private equity. I said simply, mostly investment strategy. Some nodded like they understood. Some clearly didn't. It didn't matter. And then I heard it. A laugh I would recognize anywhere, light. Sharp, confident, I turned slowly. Ava stood near the bar, exactly where I would have imagined her. Center of attention. Her hair was still perfect, her posture still practiced. A small group surrounded her as she spoke animatedly, one hand resting on her fiancé's arm. She looked successful. Polished dress, diamond ring, the kind of smile that suggests life has gone exactly as planned. For a brief second, something inside me tightened, not envy, not anger, just the old reflex, shrink. But I didn't. I took a slow breath instead. She hadn't seen me yet. I could have avoided her, slipped into conversations on the other side of the room. Left early and called it closure, but growth doesn't hide, so I walked forward. One of the girls in her circle noticed me first. Oh my God, Maya! The group turned. Ava's eyes scanned my face, searching her memory, and then recognition landed. Her smile widened. Well, she said lightly, tilting her head. Look who decided to show up. Her eyes moved over my dress, not critically, just assessing. I smiled back. Calm, hi, Ava. There was a pause, the kind that pretends to be friendly but measures power. She gave a small laugh and leaned slightly closer, lowering her voice just enough to feel personal. Still nobody, huh? It was almost playful, but I heard it clearly. The words didn't stab the way they once would have. They echoed instead like an old recording replaying itself out of habit. Some of the group chuckled softly, unsure whether it was a joke. I felt something surprising then, not humiliation, clarity, because nothing in her expression had changed. Not really, it was the same subtle dismissal, the same performance of superiority, the same need to position herself slightly above. But I wasn't 16 anymore. I'm doing well. I said evenly, thank you. She blinked, maybe expecting more. In explanation, a defense, her fiancé extended his hand politely. I'm Daniel, Maya, I replied, shaking it. He studied me for a second longer than necessary. What field are you in? Investment, I answered. Private acquisitions mostly. Ava laughed lightly. That sounds intense. I could never deal with numbers like that. I'm more of a people person. There it was again. The implication, I smiled. People are numbers sometimes. You just have to know how to read them. Daniel looked intrigued. Ava shifted slightly. I noticed it then, the smallest flicker in her confidence. But I wasn't there to win. I excused myself gently and moved toward another table, leaving her mid-conversation. The rest of the evening unfolded in fragments. Old classmates approached me privately. You always were smarter than people gave you credit for. I remember you helped me pass chemistry. I'm glad you're here. It was strange hearing those things now, validation arriving years late. Near the end of the night, I stepped outside onto the balcony for air. Through the glass doors, I could see Ava animatedly talking again, but this time she looked tired between sentences. The smile faded when no one was looking. That's when I overheard two former classmates whispering behind me. Isn't her company struggling? Yeah, I heard they're looking for outside investors, a company. I turned slightly, listening without meaning to. Something about a major acquisition happening soon. If it doesn't go through, they're in trouble. I didn't react outwardly. But inside, a quiet realization began forming. Because 3 weeks ago I had finalized the purchase of a mid-sized tech firm expanding into consumer analytics. The name of that firm, Ava & Co. At the time, it was just another opportunity, a struggling brand with potential under better leadership. I had reviewed the numbers objectively. I had seen inefficiencies, mismanagement, risky spending. I had signed the acquisition through one of our investment branches. I hadn't paid attention to the CEO full name. Now, standing on that balcony, I understood something deeper. Life doesn't always bring dramatic revenge. Sometimes it brings perspective. Inside, Ava laughed again. But it sounded thinner now, and for the first time I didn't feel small. I felt still, not because I had power over her, but because I finally understood that the girl who once needed her approval had grown into a woman who no longer required anyone's permission to belong. The truth hadn't been revealed yet, but time has a quiet way of introducing people to consequences. And I was very patient. I didn't tell anyone at the reunion, not about the acquisition, not about the board meeting scheduled for Monday. Not about the documents I had already signed. When I left that night, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt thoughtful. There's a difference. In high school, I used to rehearse imaginary confrontations in my head. I would picture myself standing up in the hallway, delivering the perfect speech that would silence Ava forever. In every version, she looked shocked, ashamed, small. But real life rarely offers cinematic justice. Real life offers something quieter. On Monday morning, I sat at the head of a long glass table in our firm's conference room. The acquisition team was prepared. Screens displayed performance charts, declining revenue, aggressive expansion. Poor liquidity management, Ava Raman's CEO, one of the analysts said, scrolling through the executive summary. Hearing her full name in a professional setting felt strange, humanizing. She's charismatic, the analyst continued carefully. Strong brand visibility, but operationally inconsistent. I didn't comment immediately. I studied the numbers instead. It wasn't personal. That's what surprised me. The spreadsheets didn't show a villain. They showed pressure. Impulsive decisions. A leader trying to maintain an image of success while the foundation cracked quietly underneath. I recognized that kind of fear. I had lived it. After the meeting, I requested a private session with her executive team. Standard procedure. I would meet the leadership individually before the official restructuring announcement. Her assistant emailed later that afternoon confirming a Thursday appointment. She didn't know yet. That part mattered. On Thursday, I arrived at her office building 15 minutes early. modern, stylish, designed to impress clients. I remembered overhearing at the reunion that she was expanding into international markets. Expansion can look like confidence. Sometimes it's panic. Her office was on the top floor, ceiling windows, clean lines, neutral tones. When I stepped inside the conference room, she was already there. She froze. For a brief second, the confident mask slipped. "Maya," she said, blinking, "what are you doing here?" Her tone wasn't mocking now. It was confused. Slightly guarded. I placed my folder on the table calmly. "I believe you received the acquisition notice this morning." Her expression shifted again, processing. "You're with the investment group. I lead it." Silence settled between us, not heavy, just real. She sat down slowly. "You bought the company," she said, almost to herself. "Yes." She let out a small breath. Not anger, not outrage, embarrassment, and there it was. "The human moment I hadn't expected. I didn't know," she said quietly. I know. The room felt smaller now, not because of tension, but because illusions were dissolving. She looked at me carefully. "Is this about high school?" It was an honest question. I considered it. "No." I said gently, "It's about numbers." She gave a short, strained laugh. "Of course." I opened the folder and slid a printed report toward her. "Your brand has potential, but the spending doesn't align with revenue growth. The international expansion was premature." Her jaw tightened slightly. Defensive instinct. We were building long-term value. You were building visibility. I corrected softly. "Not stability." She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she looked at me the way she used to in high school, trying to measure whether I was bluffing. But there was nothing to measure now. I wasn't competing. "I'm not here to humiliate you," I said, meeting her eyes. "I'm here to stabilize the company." Her shoulders lowered almost imperceptibly. For the first time, I saw something vulnerable in her expression. "I worked hard for this," she said quietly. "I believe you. And now you control it." "Yes." Another silence. But this one felt different, less about power, more about truth. She stared at the financial reports for a long moment. "Are you going to replace me?" The question wasn't arrogant, it was afraid, and in that moment something shifted inside me. Years ago, I would have wanted her to feel exactly what I felt. Small, uncertain, exposed. But watching her now, I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt understanding. "You're talented," I said carefully, "but leadership requires discipline. If you're willing to restructure and work within financial boundaries, you can stay." Her eyes lifted slowly. "You'd let me." "I'm not here to punish you." Her lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to say something else. Instead, she looked down. "I was awful to you," she said, barely audible. The words didn't explode like I once imagined they would. They landed softly. "I know." I replied. She nodded once. No excuses, no deflection, and somehow that was enough. When I left her office, I didn't feel victorious. I felt free, because power isn't in controlling someone. It's in choosing not to use your position to settle old wounds. The girl who once apologized for existing would have needed revenge. The woman I had become only needed peace, and peace, I realized, often begins with silence, not the silence of weakness, but the silence of someone who no longer needs to prove she mattered. Ava kept her position, not because of history, not because of guilt, because she agreed to change. The restructuring wasn't dramatic. There were no public announcements about control shifts or leadership tension. On paper, it looked like a strategic partnership. Internally, it meant tighter budgets, slower expansion, and accountability. For the first few weeks, she was cautious around me. In meetings, her tone softened. She listened more, interrupted less. She came prepared. Growth rarely announces itself. It reveals itself in patterns. One afternoon, about a month later, She asked if we could speak privately. I almost expected resistance. Pride, maybe even resentment. Instead, she closed the conference room door and stood still for a moment, like she was rehearsing honesty. "I've been thinking about high school," she said finally. I waited. "I don't know why I needed to be that person." She continued. I thought if I made someone else smaller, I'd feel bigger." Her voice didn't shake, but it wasn't polished either. "I was scared of being ordinary," she added quietly. The confession wasn't dramatic. It was human. "I was scared too," I said. She looked surprised. "You never showed it." "I did, just differently. For years, I believed strength meant speaking last, achieving more, outgrowing the past in silence. But sitting across from her, I understood something gentler. We had both been young, insecure in opposite directions. She performed confidence. I performed invisibility. And both of us paid for it. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said carefully. "I'm not holding on to anger," I replied. And I meant it. Forgiveness, I've learned, isn't always a dramatic declaration. Sometimes it's simply the absence of bitterness. Over the following months, the company stabilized. Expenses were reduced. Expansion paused. Internal systems improved. Revenue began climbing steadily. Not explosively, but sustainably. Ava adjusted, not perfectly, but sincerely. She stopped chasing applause, started asking harder questions, listened when analysts spoke, admitted when she didn't understand something. Leadership humbled her, and strangely, it softened her. At our final quarterly review of the year, she stayed behind after everyone left. "I'm glad it was you," she said. I tilted my head slightly. "What do you mean?" "If anyone was going to take control, I'm glad it was someone who knows what it feels like to be underestimated." There was no sarcasm in her voice, only recognition. "I didn't take control to prove something," I replied gently. "I know," she said. "That's why it worked." When I stepped outside the building that evening, the air felt different. Lighter, not because I had won, but because I hadn't needed to. Years ago, I thought healing meant confronting the people who hurt me, exposing them, making them understand the depth of what they'd done. But healing, I realized, is quieter than that. It's walking into rooms without rehearsing apologies. It's succeeding without announcing it. It's having power and choosing restraint. A few weeks later, I received a handwritten note at my office. It was from Ava, no dramatic apology. No emotional paragraphs, just this: "Thank you for seeing the potential in the company and in me. I'm working on becoming someone I would have respected back then." I read it twice. Then I folded it neatly and placed it in my desk drawer, not as a trophy, as closure. That night, I stood in my apartment in front of the same dark window where months ago I had stared at my reflection before the reunion. I saw her again, the 16-year-old girl who apologized for existing, and I felt something I had never felt toward her before. Pride. She survived without becoming cruel. She succeeded without becoming bitter. She learned to speak without raising her voice. And maybe that was the real victory, not buying a company, not sitting at the head of a table, but learning that boundaries are not walls. They are self-respect made visible. Some people will try to define you in small rooms. Some will laugh because it protects their own fear. But time reveals character, and if you stay steady long enough, life will place you in rooms where you no longer need permission to belong. I didn't walk away from Ava with revenge. I walked away with peace, and peace, I've learned, is the quietest form of emotional justice.